And stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, Vanessa, I should double check.
We're good. I've got the internet cord now, so we're good.
Okay, and audience introductions. Doesn't seem like we have an audience.
Nobody online, right?
Nope.
And approval of the agenda. Good. We have a motion. Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Okay. Delegation of visitors. Looks like we don't have anyone. Okay. Just double checking. Items of information for the board.
Yeah, so our first one, our superintendent report. So just on there, just talked about reviewing the data which we have for Spotlight Education here tonight. Some of the data that we're looking over and some of it, and aligning that with the first, well, they're going to have this revamp of accountability. So we took some of those draft standards. They're not finalized, but showing you what it would look like for us at this point if we did have those standards, and I'll kind of go into that. But we have a bunch of our annual holiday things coming up, which are pretty fun. The Thanksgiving feast is this Thursday. Actually, my aunt from Arizona is coming for that as well. To spend time with the kids, but I probably shouldn't have said that online in case my son's watching. But we have the elementary Christmas program, senior tea, all these holiday events become mainstay community events in our school. That's great for our families, grandparents, community members, to have them into our school. So look forward to those. Food for All, we've tried to increase our number of schools that are participating in activities to reduce some of the missed instructional time on our students have when they're helping so many families through our region. I want to thank our community partners and those other partner schools I was mentioning that help us deliver approximately 400,000 pounds of food each year. So some of them we got started early. We had a couple of companies that called us about a month ago with some donations already. So Hutch was already helping distribute those food items around the Willamette Valley. Mostly onions. So if you need onions, let us know. And then on the court, our volleyball team finished second in the league and had a tough matchup with North Douglas, who's always a perennial power in the first round of the state playoffs. And our high school football team won the game at McMinnville High School with Powder Valley, and then just lost against another perennial power, the Dufur Rangers, the number one seed this last weekend. So we have a lot of youth on that boys team, not one senior on the squad. So look forward to what the future may hold for that as well. And congratulations to both teams. Our girls basketball for middle school starting out, and they I think are 3-0 now. Is that correct? Yep. So 3-0 right now. So that's great. And then our middle school team, we had a tournament for our youth team, I should say, this last weekend, and then the weekend before, I believe we had both weekends, correct? So that's pretty exciting. Again, thank you for Daniel Domes and the parent coaches working with the younger programs. That's something that we've had parents express to us over the last couple of years about our youth programs and seeing if we can expand those and continue to offer some of that volleyball, the basketball. We have it for boys going into, trying to get some stuff going for the girls as well. And then lastly, I'd like to thank our staff for the work and dedication to our students. A lot of them going above and beyond on a daily basis. And we have a lot of staff that are here on Fridays. Appreciate that extra work they do. So thank you.
I'll go ahead and start then. Pumpkin Days was a big hit, just like it typically is. Our kiddos have a week long worth of pumpkin themed activities, and that ends with some pumpkin carving. And that leads right into our Halloween carnival. Lots of families were able to attend, quite a few volunteers. We were nervous until the very end, and they all turned up, and we just really couldn't run that event without them. Ending our first term, both for middle school and elementary. Our turkey trot was just this last Friday, so I was impressed to see in such a short amount of time how we have students running in the 50s lap. That's quite a few laps in that short amount of time. And middle school tomorrow, we'll be headed to Oregon State for the basketball game against Utah State. And Dan mentioned our Thanksgiving feast, and then we've got fall conferences coming up next week.
All right, our special ed department serving 31 students on IEPs, 14 students on 504s. We hired Angelica Johnson to replace Victoria White's position. And we've got someone from EduStaff, Elena Canales, is filling in for a staff member who's out on maternity leave. Our coffee cart is back in business, and students are enjoying the opportunity to prepare drinks, count money, and work on appropriate customer service skills during many of these tasks.
And are there any questions on the facility and maintenance update? Well, there's quite a bit that he puts in there, so I'm not quite sure if you have any. If you do end up having some, let us know. And you can send an email and we'll make sure we figure that out. You'll get any questions that you may have. I know that you're probably not as worried about Aaron's old desk into the nurses area, but maybe there are some other pressing issues that you're concerned with, et cetera. So,
Or hockey.
yeah, we don't like floor hockey during the basketball, before basketball season. After basketball season, yes. So I already talked with our newer PE teacher, who's a little green, and they do me a favor, do that floor hockey after basketball season.
We also talked about shoes. Kids were not thinking about wearing PE shoes on PE days in the small gym, so
Yeah.
I think that's going to mitigate some of that.
Maybe.
Maybe even more so than the hockey pads, really, because kids were wearing their boots.
All right. So anyway, if you have any other questions, let us know. And other than that, I think that's it for the reports there. Want me to go into the next one?
Yep.
Okay. New hires and resignation. So interim high school girls basketball coach, Lindsay Gunther. So we had 3 people on a selection committee last week. Lindsay Lindsay's coached basketball and also some softball, soccer in her past as well. And so she also played basketball in the field. So we're excited to have Lindsay help with our girls and also have Cheyenne still helping out with as the assistant. And that looks like we'll have a couple of volunteers helping as well.
And so since that's interim, then will it just be reassessed?
It'll be a
after the
recess
season?
at the end, and then we'll open that up for everybody. And then the Division 22 standards we looked at. This is like the 3rd time we've had to put this on here. I know you were gone last time, but they just, we just had our, this, actually, hold on. I was like, wait a second, that's the wrong thing. I have to go back. I was looking at the minutes then right there. So next one, sorry. Contracts for the certified and confidential like members for each negotiations is the one that we're on next. So I apologize for that. I was
so confused.
I was too. I was like, wait a second. But the SIA is the one we have to talk about. The SIA, we actually have to talk about the fact that we had received our grant agreement. So that's what we have to talk about again, even though we already talked about SIA. But anyway, the contracts are certified and confidential. So usually we start selecting people at this time to go over those and see who's on that committee. So our contracts up for confidential, we have Miss Vanessa over there, we have Troy, and then we also have Jerry on those contracts for this coming year. And then for certified, obviously that's the teacher's contract. So I'm not quite sure who's willing to do that. We could actually have one person probably either for each of the confidential or one person may be able to do both. Or I'm not really including Jerry's yet, but both Troy and Vanessa's, one person that wanted to do both, we could do that. It just depends on what you folks as a board would like to do. I'd be willing to help out with that. Cindy would be able to provide numbers for us as well. So I'm willing to help support in that role for those ones. And then with the certified, we usually have two board members for that one. And then Cindy and I help out. Vanessa has been, this last year, she was kind enough to help take notes, and we could look to get somebody else if she's has something else going on for those times of the day. But so that's been very helpful.
When does the certified start?
That'll start around February 1st. You know, just the easy time of year for you.
Yeah, I would, I feel like either Jenny or I need to do that with somebody new, so you guys don't like have to do your first one alone. So maybe let me check with her.
Okay.
And then I don't know if anyone's really excited to do the teachers negotiations
Oh, the teacher ones you're talking about?
for the certified.
Yeah.
Like if either of you would be, maybe go into we meet, what is it, every other week? Is that what we
Sometimes every week, sometimes every other, just to
Yeah.
have progress.
And it's usually about an hour after school, going through kind of contract negotiations. So it is kind of a time commitment.
That one usually takes more time commitment than the confidential ones. The confidential ones usually a little bit easier because we can look at some of the community standard in our area to see, comparable salaries for the same, job alike type situation. So that one usually takes a couple of meetings. The other ones with the certified staff definitely historically has taken more time than that. And I don't know what this year brings. So it was going to a positive outlook. So, hopeful again, but I know we're curious to see what numbers come out of the state legislature.
And we could also, I don't know what people's schedules are like. We could also see if Tori has a more flexible schedule too. So
We can always come back to.
maybe come back in December, maybe when we have a full. Does that work time wise?
Yeah, that should work. I
Okay.
just want to make sure we at least put it on the radar and try to get that
Yeah.
going at least right after break for at least confidential ones. And try to start working on those maybe in that first month back, if that works for the board. Sound good? You too?
I'm happy to help, I just don't want to do that.
Okay.
And then next up, we have goals. Not sure if you want to set up a work session. That's part of the reason why I did this, or why we did have this to present for the accountability draft model that the state's going to look like they're going to be implementing. So wanted to at least have this data so that way the board has those data points. Some of that is 5-year cohort completion, 4-year graduation rate, 9th grade on track, regular attenders, which was K through 12. Notice that some of those, like 1920, didn't have that because of COVID, et cetera. And then 2021 was a weird way they figured it out. And then the K through 2 is new. And then we'll get into these other ones on the back, which is ELA proficiency and math, because one of the bottom things you'll see is the district will possibly have a choice of 1 out of like 5 to do. And that's what this other sheet is, which is a growth model. And I'll explain that later during our spotlight on education at 4G. So don't know if you folks want to do the goal session sooner rather than later, if you want to wait until I know the ODE meeting, I believe, is going to be the middle of December, where they're going to look at some of this accountability piece to implement that. They had talked about some of that on the financial piece with creating more spots in the budget for all schools, and that has been put on hold until probably July of 2027 instead of July of 2026, just because of the amount of time. So if that's something that you want to wait to discuss when we have the other 2 board members, which would make some sense, we could do that. I just, again, want to make sure it was on the agenda so we didn't have it by the wayside there.
So you'll have more information. Do you think you'll have more information from Department of Ed by our next board meeting?
On the accountability, yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like we will,
Okay.
but they already, said they're gonna go ahead and wait on the EGMS thing, so or not EGMS, but the budget. So I'm curious to see what they end up doing with these accountability measures, because they're saying they're coming, which it looks like this.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting in October on the 20th or 21st. So that's our hope.
Okay. Because I was thinking a lot of those don't kick in until later.
They probably don't. We're just gonna start tracking.
Sure,
them.
okay. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense to have more information and then probably, like this would be updating our previous goals as well. So probably getting those to everyone as well ahead of that.
So again, same thing. I think waiting to hear back from the other two on setting the date for that would be advisable. So I'm gonna write that down. All right, so state and federal funding update. There's a couple of us on this. So, Katie deals with this stuff more frequently than I do. I hear stuff, she presents stuff. So there may be a difference there. And obviously, she's got her, ear there at the legislature, and mine goes through a couple of other people. So anyway, Katie had offered to share some data. It's the colorful general fund. It's in a beautiful green color. And so I want to thank you for that.
Well, yeah, how I normally do this presentation is I apologize for
Yeah,
the
do you
slide
really?
that it's in green and gold. But when Dan had this on the agenda, I just offered, because I've been talking with my employer quite a bit, and so I've done several presentations on the state budget, but we are likely moving into a scenario where the state budget is going to have to be reassessed during the February session. And the big driver of that is the passage of HR 1 at the federal level. So the big, beautiful bill, it does two things. It changes our tax structure for the state in a few areas. And then it also will impact federal money that comes into agencies for programs that they administer. So this first slide is from the August revenue forecast for the state, and it was the first revenue forecast assessment after HR 1 passed in July. And so the columns on the right-hand side, the green column is what the estimated tax revenue was kind of at the end of session and the state does a 2-year biennium budgeting. So for 25-27, you'll see 27-29, so kind of forecasting out. And then the tan bar is what the estimated revenue forecast is after the passage of HR 1. And you'll see we're down $880 million. And it's because the state automatically connects to the federal tax code. And so when the feds took away putting tax on tip revenue and on overtime, and then there's several business tax breaks as well, our state automatically connects to that so that your state taxes are aligned with your federal taxes. And so that is an $880 million shortfall for the state. And you'll see it continues out for several biennium until 31-33 when we balance out. And the legislature last session knew that we were going to have impacts from the federal government coming. So they tried to put a large beginning balance or ending fund balance at the end of the session. But so there's a beginning balance of $2 billion. So we should be fine. But the kicker is also going to kick, and that's $1.4 billion. So at the end, we are projecting a shortfall of $373 million, and the state budget has to be balanced by the end of session or the end of the biennium. So they can't go into debt. So they've got to make some adjustments. But if you go to the next page, that's only part of the story because we also have federal funds that come into the state. We actually bring in more federal funds than we do in tax revenue. And the big impacts are to Department of Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority, so SNAP and Medicaid. And so you'll see by bienniums, GF is general funds, so that's our tax revenue. OF is other funds, and then FF is federal funds. So for this biennium, we're short roughly $1 billion in federal funds coming in. And then it grows dramatically because of Medicaid in 27, 29, and just continues on. Partly what they will do is we will no longer have as many SNAP beneficiaries as we've had. And also they will make adjustments to Medicaid, but this will probably not go to zero. We will still be putting more in. I think it's just a choice on what the legislature is going to do. So then the last slide kind of has kind of my take on what the options are. So one is they need to determine what their ending fund balance is going to be, and if they're going to plan for some cushion in case the economy drops and tax revenues aren't what they think. So right now the legislature is like assessing what all the revenue impacts are. And we have a revenue forecast on Wednesday coming out. So we'll get some updated numbers. And then they're kind of going through, these are only just two of the agencies. It's the bigger ones. It's some of the natural resource agencies bring in a lot of federal funds, transportation's another. So they're looking at just where the cost impacts are from the federal government. And then the governor has directed state agencies to reduce spending, but those actions only are saving about 97 million. So it doesn't get us to that 373. And then in kind of going into the legislative session, all the agencies have been asked to provide 5% cut lists. So Department of Ed has put together a list, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, Department of Ag, they've all kind of submitted into the legislature some cut lists. I think they're hoping they only really need to do 2.5% this year, but it might be up to 5%, depending what the revenue forecast is on Wednesday, and then we have another one in February. There's some discussion about, will they disconnect on some of those proposals from the feds? I don't know. I don't think they will. And then we have 2 reserve accounts that can be utilized that are kind of as savings accounts for this type of time. So there's a rainy day fund. It has a little over $2 billion. There's an education stability fund. It has a little over $1 billion. Those require a 3/5 vote from each chamber. And then also some sort of economic impact driver. So I think it's like 2 revenue forecasts down, the job numbers are down 2 quarters in a row. So there's something showing that there's an impact to it. But I'm kind of hearing that they want to save those for the future bienniums. But there'll be a big debate on if they should tap those or not. So it's kind of like just kind of giving a look. And I think the biggest message that we're all looking at is this isn't a one-time come in. This is like resetting what I think the state government kind of looks like. And so it could have impacts for us, like continuing on in the future bienniums.
Thank you. Appreciate that. How many times do you have to give that?
I think like 10 or 12.
Yeah. Everybody loves you when you're done with it each
Yeah.
time, I bet. Huh?
Yeah.
So, well, going along with that, this other packet here, I just did some selected slides because there are 28 slides total. I'm not going to go through all that, obviously, but some of the ones that impacted us or that I wanted you to see. So with us, Cindy and I started looking at some things on how that would impact us or some ways we may be able to save. We started looking at some ODEs urging us to, kind of wait to start doing some of the heavy lift on that, because at this point they're saying, the legislature, not ODE, are the ones that make those decisions on the funding, et cetera. So at this point they're saying, be mindful of some of the other activities, but with the funds that you get for high school success or for SIA or your general fund, try to utilize those the way that they're designed at this point. And then at this time, no reductions are being implemented, but it's a planning process. Programs continue as normal for now. They want to wait until we hear the data this Wednesday, and then we'll have a better idea of what those items may start looking like. So I think once we hear that number on Wednesday, they have a person who I would say similar, I guess, to you, Katie, in your role, but his name is Morgan at COSA. He works with us and lets us know kind of what's going on with the funding for education, specifically K-12, and what we may be looking at. So, I mean, he works with people at the legislature, but again, some of this is guest stuff. Some of it he knows, and some we all don't know because we don't know what the funding's going to look like yet. But the other page there, it says reduction targets, what they're talking about. If it's a 5%, like Katie was talking about, or 2.5%, what would that look like? One thing that is interesting, and it's on the very bottom one, it's talking about 5% state school fund. They accidentally screwed up and said smaller increments, likely 0.05%. It should say 0.5%. So you'll see that. They marked that one down in 0.5 and then 1.5, all the way down to 5. So they're talking about that the state school fund may be in different increments, just depending on how much is taken out. So they started looking at that reduction. I'm not exactly sure why. They didn't really explain that too much. They just said that it may be a little bit different rate, but that's why they have broken it down so far. But I wanted to bring your attention to that typo that they have there. So that's what it looks like. CAP fund is corporate activity tax. So those are items like when you talk about student investment account, or you start looking at high school success, is in some of these specific funds that come with strings. And so I have a process that I showed you earlier that Cindy had done on the back, and we'll go over that at the minute or in a few minutes. But the other programs that most of these we do not have, and these are ones that will not be impacted, and you can see what those are. Again, we don't have a ton of those. We have some like some of the items, with blind and visually impaired, but we don't have a lot of funding we get from that. Some of the rural school stuff, but again, it's not a lot that we get from these specific ones that they have here. And then what does it mean for programs right now? Again, programs should continue operating as usual with a caveat there and an asterisk. And the allocations are being distributed as planned using current legislatively adopted budgets. Again, this is coming from Department of Education. So use those funds as intended to support students and programs while OD and legislature continues discussions, and no funding reduction or change be implemented at this time. But again, we realize that there's a funding, or they were saying they realize there's a funding update on Wednesday, and then all the fun work this week that folks are doing at the legislature, talking about what may be on the agenda coming up in February. So 35 days, right? The short session, is that correct? So
They really said like just continue like
on
not like-
some of the ones like the SIA
not like
and those
try to
items like
save
that.
money right now.
They didn't say it specifically like that, no. But notice I said with a giant asterisk, right? So this is what we're provided with. Again, we're not the ones who made the slides. So OD submitted its required planning materials to the Legislative Fiscal Office on November 3rd, and they'll review those materials. OD will provide information as requested and present to the legislature during the legislative days, which is this week. And then formal budget decisions will occur during the session coming up this February. Until that time, planning scenarios are simply part of the broader statewide fiscal conversation. And then you see what Cindy, thank you, did this last week on estimates on the impacts of 2.5% and 5%. We're okay at 2.5% likely as far as not impacting students. It will impact some administrative costs for the SIA budget. And then at the 5%, what they're telling us is at 5%, then that would be about 15%. So what Cindy had done is looked at what our allocation is percentage-wise for this year, which you see that 0.0699%. And so she took that same percentage and then with the reduction, what that would look like for next year. So again, these are just estimates and an exercise that she did. And then for the high school success dollars, you can see that's based on our 9 through 12 ADMW, which was 137. And then with the reduction of 5%, then again, it would look like about $6,100. So right there, we have about 22,000, and that's on top of other things that would come, schools, state school fund, et cetera. So right now, we feel like we can get most of those dollars recouped through just not purchasing as many materials and shuffling some of the items we had for both the SIA and high school success. Again, it's early on, but we are starting to look at what are some ways that we could, cut some costs, et cetera, in order to start thinking about that in case we have to get out in front of that pretty quickly. So I don't know if you have any questions for me or for Katie, the other two, or anybody else here.
I just want to say that this is just an estimate, and at our meeting, someone asked if there was some sort of sheet or formula that would tell us, how much we would be affected by it. And they said no. So I just figured I could figure it out, because I can figure out what our percentage of it was. So that's what I did. So if someone else comes up with another formula that they share out with us, I'll use that also and compare the two. But after I did it, I even put it into ChatGPT and said, here's this, if it's reduced by this, and it came out with the same thing. So,
And just like with our superintendent group, or, Cindy has her group that she meets with too, with the business managers, and they talk quite a bit about, funding situations that they hear as well. So we'll let you know and update you when we hear certain things. I know some of you already hear some stuff, but a lot of you folks don't. I know Jenny will too, with her job as well through the state. So,
and they did mention one of the goals with the state school fund is the reductions would come from the carve outs and set asides, and each district's like monthly allotment of the state school fund. They were hoping that would not change. Their goal is for that not to change. So we don't have those carve outs at like whatever groups or things that those pay for. We don't utilize those. So ours is just our regular allotment of the state school fund. So their proposal is that if they have to reduce money from the overall state school fund, it's not going to be each district's monthly portion.
some of the other items, and Katie, I can show you more of the slide deck later on. You may have interest to see some of the other part, but some of the other items we're concerned about, even things like FFA, not funding FFA, the second part of the biennium. Those are things that would impact us, and we don't want to raise, start crying wolf too early, but those definitely are on our radar. I already talked with Kirk Fairchild and McKenna, but I also talked to Hutch, try to see what they're hearing on their end of things. They did receive an email from kind of the lead teacher of FFA in the state, and then Hutch, I noticed that he was going to talk to the ag person at ODE, CTE leader there at ODE, and try to see what they may know a little bit more as well. So we do worry about, programs like that may be impacting, which would impact our kids. We obviously wouldn't want that, and we try to minimize that. We don't, the summer learning grants that we have for our FFA advisors are paid through that. And then our kids' fees are paid through that as well. But that's primarily what we get from the FFA, in addition to, the professional development that our staff get, et cetera, from that. But it doesn't pay the SIA fund pays more of their salary for one of the positions, et cetera, and an FFA advisor slot comes through SIA dollars. If I was wrong on that, correct me, but I believe that's
So that is, yeah. And right now we're the FFA fund is the 255 fund, which we do a general fund transfer to that for the budget every year. And then we get back some of that we don't pay from that fund, we don't pay the fees for the students and the summer grants, but besides that, the other things that they do with that fund, we're already putting money in there and they don't generally use that amount every year. So I did ask Kirk McKenna to find out how much the fees are for each student so we can try to estimate before it comes time for budgeting.
Yeah, it's the same.
And then I already have their summer grant stuff fairly figured out because I have to submit that for them. Couple other ones we don't know about, career pathways. I couldn't get really a straight answer from the person in charge of that as to what percentage our allotment is or what the full career pathways, like she didn't know where to find that information. So I couldn't figure that out. But right now it's like 13 to 15,000 for 2 years is what that's been over the last few years. So I don't know. That's the one I don't know how that one will be affected.
So picturing it a little clearer after Wednesday and then over the next month after that, once they have that going into the session, they'll probably have some understanding kind of what range they may have, but who knows at the end. Depends on what's decided after the 35-day session.
So the top is the SIA allocation,
Correct.
Yeah,
and then what's the next
high
one?
school success.
Okay, and then, but what about, are they not projecting reductions for the state school fund?
They are, but they said that the reductions that they're projecting will come from the carve-outs and set-asides that are part of the state school fund. And I don't know a lot about those
Okay.
because we don't have anything that's tied to either of those things.
Yeah.
We just have our regular monthly state school fund based on our ADMW.
Okay,
So their proposal is that if they have to do reductions,
They
they're
take it out of
taking
there.
out of that. So
Okay.
each school district will still at least be getting their
oh, okay, okay,
monthly state school fund.
that's a whole other world.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, yeah.
Yeah,
But again, it's up to the legislature to decide what that's gonna look like. So we're kind of doing a hurry up and wait with some of it, but at the same time, as Katie was alluding to, we don't want to just say, oh, okay, here we go.
Right.
yeah,
They said it would
I'll-
not affect anything until, one of the reasons why they said to spend the high school success and your SIA dollars is because it's already been allocated for this year. So as it becomes available for us to claim with our agreements for this year, all of that is still going to be allocated to us. And we have to spend it by June 30th. So that's why they said to spend those as normal, because we can't save those for next
As
year
per the
anyway.
law. Yeah.
So,
I'll look it up. There's a hearing where I think they'll run through maybe the budget this week. They might be interested in listening to, might get a little more intel.
Hopefully Friday.
No, it's like maybe tomorrow.
Oh,
I have to look and see.
so that's the latest. So again, if anybody here has any questions now or later, they can always ask those. You can shoot us emails, as you start hearing stuff. And when we know more on Wednesday, we'll let you know. For those that may not be, keen to hearing about that with their jobs. All right. And then the SIA presentation, yes, we received our grant agreement. And wanted to make sure that you folks were aware and the public was aware, and if there's any public there, they can have comment. Those are things that we have to make sure we do in order to receive those funds. But we, had our agreement, the amount you can actually see. It's convenient because it was on the back page here that we were just looking at. Sorry, that Cindy had given to us. So our SIA dollars for this year
Oh, it's
are
on that
there.
page, yeah.
It's actually on that page. So our grant agreement right there it's a 2-year biennium, but for this year, the amount that we're scheduled to get is $378,000, $471.43, and then the next year is scheduled right now to be $393,919.24. So the total allocation for the 2 years is $772,000. That's So it's a significant amount. Again, what that pays for is staffing and supplies for most of this, some professional development, but we pay for 2 assistants in the elementary. Well, it can be K-8, a math, especially with Mrs. Wilson. We also pay for one of our CTE positions with that as well. And then Maggie's position with our high school success, our student success is paid for with the one on the bottom, in addition to supplies and some professional development, et cetera. And again, that one is, not the one we're discussing right now, but you can see the amounts for that one as well. So I think that was it, correct, that you saw? We just had to show that we got it. Yep. So there you go. Information for the board right there. At least it wasn't as doom and gloom, that one. So, and then last one under information for the board. So you have paperwork in front of you that's tabulated looking back. One of them is, again, the accountability draft model point for data points, or I should say model data points, not point data points. You'll see the 5-year cohort completion. So again, that means if you came in, as a freshman at this time, not only through the 4 years of high school, but in case somebody doesn't graduate, to make sure they complete on time. We traditionally have a really good number with that, but even after COVID, we have continued to have really good numbers, whereas some districts' numbers have slipped. But you can see that even they're staying pretty solid at that 86% of the students that are still enrolled in their district. Again, those numbers have gone down, as we discussed, for the number of kids in their district, though. But you can see the difference between the state and Perrydale School each year. The ones that we had, for example, in 22-23, we had a student that did not complete, that ended up switching schools and then not finishing up. And then prior to that, in 19-20, had a student that, 2 students, but did not end up finishing up that year. And then COVID hit and they didn't finish up during that 5-year time. So, and then the 4-year graduation rate is exactly what it sounds like. They finish within 4 years. 9th grade on track. Again, that is, are they on track to graduate at the end of their freshman year? The one that gets our kids hung up a little bit as far as not getting a good grade. Some, if it's an English class or a math class, et cetera, we can work with them. And we have processes in place in order to make sure that we help get them those credits. And especially if we have them do that by the end of the summer, they're actually able until the end of September to finish that class that maybe they failed, and then they're back on track. And so we do a pretty good job of trying to make sure that they stay on track with that. Those are the items that we've had. You can see 95%. Each student represents about 4 to 5%. So the 1 year we had 2021, that was obviously when we were out of school for the first part of that school year. And then we got most of those people back on track, because you can see, the most recent year isn't released. It'll be released this Thursday. So for up on top, that 24-25 information is our at a glance, and that report card that will be released on Thursday this week. So I can't release that information till then, but with the meeting today, I want to make sure we had 5 years of data points there. And then on the bottom there, he talks about regular attenders. So the regular attenders for the state has dropped dramatically since 2020, as you can see right there. Our school has been fairly stable. In fact, I've been pretty happy with where we are overall. That being said, we want to still improve attendance and get that to 85 or 90% of our kids attending regularly. Again, that means 10% of the school days, so 15 days missed for the year. And it doesn't matter if it's for doctor's appointments, vacation, you're sick, whatever it may be. Usually most students fall within that 15-day range, but there are some, as you can see, about 20% of our students that do not fall into that range. And so we're trying to make a push, as all of you folks that have high school kids, you guys got something in your mail about what the students' attendance was in the middle school. It was sent out to those that may have been struggling to meet that mark.
And elementary.
And elementary, sorry.
Yeah.
And then on the K through 2 regular attenders, that's a new accountability item that the state had not been focused on, but it makes sense. Whereas the regular part, or the others, not regular, the other classes in elementary may have like a 90 to 95% attendance rate. Kinder and first grade are quite a bit less, in the 70s sometimes, when you have that age group. So in order to see that number go up, and our juniors and seniors going up as well, that's what we shoot for. Usually grades 3 through 10 are probably pretty stable, I would say, compared with the rest of the other 4 classes. And then on the back here, ELA, this is obviously glaring, and I put red there on purpose, obviously, because it's negative. That's the starting points, and then we'll look at the growth part of it here in a second. So the ELA proficiency is year to year. Doesn't matter. It's not like looking at a cohort over time and their growth. It just boomed this year. And what did you get on that one? So our school and our state, and then you see for the math and the ELA. And in the past, again, ELA used to be pretty strong. Math was the struggle. And then the accountability standards on the bottom, you'll see we'll focus on one local metric as well, is what it appears like. And those are the items that we were told that will likely be included. Of those, I don't think the bottom 3 probably really relate to us, because the dropout, we have really good marks for that. Severely chronically absent is defined as 80% of the time or less that you're at school. So not just chronically absent, but the severely part. We don't really have a lot of students that fall in that area. We don't have a lot of English language proficiency students. So we have a handful, and we already track those students. And then, so I think that if these end up being the 5, we would look at something like the student belonging, which we could look at through 2 different surveys that we use. With the C's is through the state, Youth Truth, that's another vendor that we use through the ESD. And then the assessment growth right there. So the assessment growth, if you look at this one on here, this page, this actually tracks them. I need to find it. You can look at this later on when you get home or next week or whatever. But the 3rd grade right there, you'll see there's no 23 or 24 state test for them, because it starts in 3rd grade. So they took this test last year, 24-25, and they got that amount. There's no difference from the year before. So it says an A for gain or loss. The 4th grade scored a 50% this year. For their ELA scores, 43% was the state average. So they were a +7 for the difference. But then when you look at them from last year, they were a -13% when they were in 3rd grade. So compared to the state average, because it's hard when you go from one year to the next without looking at where that is with the state, how do you compare with the rest of your peers in the statewide? So that ends up being a gain of 20% when it looks at where you are in comparison with the rest of the state for that cohort level. And then same with the next grade. Then would be 5th grade. This year was 36. Last year was 35, but you see that last year was 42. This year's 47 for the state score. So as a result, that's -4%. So you can see how we did that with the rest of them. Again, definition there on the bottom left. Probably the one that was the highest one, obviously, was 6th grade. They did not do very well, to say the least, on the 23-24 score. They got 5% for the math, while the state was 31, so a -26. Well, this year they were 12 points higher than the state. So that was a net gain of 38% when you compare it against the peers. When we talked with some of the students in that class last year about the 5%, we had some students respond with, we didn't try very hard, et cetera. And so this year, they obviously tried a little harder than what they had previously, but again, 41%, and that's 12 points higher than the state average. So you can see where they track compared to the state each year, but you can also see some of the growth that they made compared to their peers. So we try to give the growth in 2 different areas or loss. So again, we're hearing that that's kind of looking at the data from one year to the other as far as their growth. Christy with elementary, for example, in middle school, she actually has it broken down per kid, not just for that, but we can't obviously share that data here at school, but she's able to share that with her staff in the K-8 model there. One thing we wish we did have was more data for 9th and 10th grade, because it's really difficult to compare one year to the next, and especially growth when you have 2 years missed. So we don't know if they will have some other type of way for us to gain that, unless they're going to look at more of a localized assessment. So that would be like something we do at the beginning of the year and end of the year, or 3 times a year. So if, let's say for high school math, freshman year, they have something for algebra 3 times a year that they take. And are we making progress on those interim progress markers? And if we do, that may be the way that we can show that progress. They haven't really defined what that progress will look like. This is one way that we've seen, but again, we're not sure what they're going to do in order to show what that game looks like. But we did want to make that part of this, because this is, you know, these progress markers are going to be the items that we look at when it comes to, you know, the data points for the accountability draft from what we're hearing. So again, when it comes time for goals, I thought it was important for you folks to have that data in order for us to look at what are some glaring needs. Obviously, Chris and I have some concerns, as you do too, and the teachers do, about some of where our starting points are with those percentages, not just with some of the growth. Yes, there was some growth made with one class to the next year in some of these classes, which is great. But again, the starting point needs to increase. I don't know if you wanted to add to that as well.
No, but feel free to reach out, and as you're digesting the information, reach out and we can help explain.
And we know it's a lot of information there.
How would on the 8th grade math, 23, 24, how would you get 0?
That's what you like. If you have
That's not one
2s or
student.
1s, that was 0. We looked at that last year, if you remember.
Yeah,
'Cause
I remember we
had
talked about it. It
numbers.
was like a lot of opt-outs or.
Yep, and so
And
that's
that's
something we
bad,
talked
and
about
some of
today.
Finishing an assessment in 10 minutes. And we're not allowed to encourage kids to spend longer. We're not allowed to guide them in any way. We're giving them an assessment and they choose whether they take it seriously or not. That's been a challenge. But again, every school deals with those
Yeah.
challenges. So when we see 0, we're certainly not okay with that. And there was a drastic increase last year. And I think some of that comes from, there's several different thought patterns. Some people are, not high supporters of statewide testing. And so when kids hear that information, they decide it's not important also, or if it doesn't impact them necessarily directly in their report cards or different ways that it can impact students, they don't necessarily take it as seriously. But just having some conversations with kiddos last year of, we need you guys to take your time, then just hearing some of that, and then some of our test prep prior to, without teaching to the test and spending an unreasonable amount of time, just teaching kiddos how to look an assessment without it feeling so daunting, we feel like has been helpful.
No, and the 1-0% here, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. That's just the difference between
No, it's
the one from last year.
Yeah.
The 8th grade class last year, did struggle with that one, for sure.
the 1 year before, the 8th grade class the year before.
It was the year before, yeah.
We know that was.
So again, we'll have some of the other data points that we're able to release after Thursday, the most updated report card, et cetera. So, but again, we want to make sure we got that to you. We had talked about that at the last meeting. So. All right.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions? Consent agenda. Can I take a motion?
I second.
All those in favor? No, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Motion passes. And then items for board action enrollment.
Yeah, so as it says here, we've been granted the opportunity to fill and backfill open in specific classes. that we asked for during the summer. What we're seeking here is to backfill all classes as spots become open during the school year. No backfill would occur above 25 in elementary or 26 in middle or high school, depending on the class needs. For example, the junior class had 27. It looks like, we lost one to online. That's 26. We wouldn't be looking to fill any spots like that. It would just be if they started getting down 23, 22, we would start looking to make sure that we have those numbers. Our budget's built on the ADM and ADMW, as we discussed earlier, and when that starts decreasing, especially in a time like this, we want to make sure we're being prudent in getting students in those seats if possible, in order to make sure that we're trying to, stem any of the loss that we may be having later on. So I was hoping to get a motion that we may be able to have the ability to backfill those spots. Again, I just proposed the limits of 25 in elementary and then 26 in middle school or high school. Those numbers can be different. Again, this is set by the board, but we want to make sure that we are able to fill some of those seats.
Yeah, I'd just say, I'm comfortable with those numbers if you all are.
Okay. So three yeses, so I need a motion.
I move to give authority for you to backfill classes to not be above 25 in elementary and not above 26 students in middle school or high school. Is that what I need to say?
Yeah, and all classes K through 12.
All classes K through 12.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any in opposition? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, patron input, unless we have anyone online. No,
And we have the
haven't
one
sent it.
letter that was sent to you folks
Oh,
last
yeah.
month, but I did make sure I called today and again reminded her she has the option to come speak, and she wasn't able to come speak. But you received that, and she said that was just for you to be able to digest for further information if needed. So
Board comments. Okay. Announcement of dates.
yeah, Holiday Craft Fair coming up this weekend. Maggie's doing this as part of her community outreach stuff. Last year was great. We had a lot of booths there, both some students and groups, but then also people from the greater community. That was a pretty good deal. I know you guys had a booth there that you were working with groups, but
Did a good session.
yeah, I think it's pretty great. So look forward to seeing that on this coming Saturday. So it's 10 to 3 in the big gym. And then on the 24th and 25th, we have conferences. On Monday, they're from 8 a.m. until 7:20 is the end of the last session, and then we'll be done at about 7:30. And then on Tuesday, it goes until about noon, so 8 to noon that day. On November 29th, our alumni basketball game here at Perrydale, the big gym. December 1st, Food for All starts with an exclamation point. Thank you, Vanessa, in case we forgot.
Mhm.
Senior tea on the 10th. Again, this is great. You had said you communicated with at least one of the retirement homes on Saturday.
That's for something separate. That's
Oh,
for our band students to go and.
Oh, I thought that was a senior team. My bad.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, well, we've advertised for a senior tea, but there have been some pretty big shifts since COVID for facilities bringing clients here. But we have a great showing of grandparents and community members that come.
Mhm.
So
One other thing this week, again, on Thursday, we have the holiday feast that's coming up. And then you see the winter program on the 11th. And then the next school board meeting on the 15th. Obviously, we have basketball games sprinkled in there. And Jade has 3 different games she'll be within each day, forever.
Enjoy a life, yeah.
yeah, no kidding. Huh?
So like, who doesn't have to drive anybody anywhere anymore?
anymore, but we survived.
Yeah. So, any other dates?
I don't think so.
All right.
Okay. I think we're adjourned.
8:00, not 9.
1 hour.
Like right as you said adjourn, it hit
At 8.
Yeah.
So